Hello, welcome to the lecture on blood. Blood is more complicated than people think. We definitely see it as a sign of vitality, and it's definitely always a bad thing if your blood is coming out of your body in another way than a menstrual cycle. So let's talk about what's happening with blood. So blood, it has actually a lot of functions. So we know we need blood because it moves oxygen around. It takes carbon dioxide away from our tissues. So as our cells go through respiration, they take in oxygen, they use that to transport energy or to create energy, and then the waste product is carbon dioxide, which is the opposite of what plants are doing. So we have to get rid of this carbon dioxide or bad things happen. So blood is what takes that away. We also need blood as a fluid transport system. It can move nutrients around from where we take in food in the digestive system to the rest of the body. On the other side of this is once you break down food particles, you create waste, and that waste has to be taken away and then excreted from the body either through the digestive system or the skin or I guess if you count carbon dioxide, you also can breathe out waste, so that carbon dioxide waste. So that's another big part of blood is it moves that waste product around. We talked recently about how hormones are transported through the blood system. Okay, hormones are not directly placed onto their targets. They have to be transported in the blood. We are going to talk when we get to the urinary system a lot about the acid-base balance system. There are a lot of diets right now that talk about like, oh, you have to maintain a certain acidity in your blood or blah blah. There actually is some validity to that, but it can't necessarily just be controlled by diet. Your blood does a lot of this buffering to make sure your different parts of your body are maintaining certain acid balances. And so another important thing, blood goes to wounds and does coagulation. We'll talk a little bit about what that means, basically clotting. If you have an open wound, you want blood to go in and kind of fill it in with material so you don't lose all of your blood. That's actually a function of blood maintaining itself, sort of. We'll talk about it. Blood is very important in water balance, so we'll talk about that a little bit. It's kind of a complicated system. Just know the way that we it's very important for us to maintain a certain amount of water in our system for so many reasons, for osmolarity. Remember, if you have a whole lot of salts or sugars or whatever outside of a cell, it will start to dry up. It'll shrink because the water all tries to leave the cell as a result. You don't want that to happen. So water balance is very important. It maintains blood pressure in order to be moving. You can't be moving all these things through the blood system if you don't have the right blood pressure. So that's a problem. So water balance is important in that. Blood is involved in temperature regulation a lot. So when you're really hot, the vessels in your skin will open up so that you can move more blood to your skin, and then those hot molecules, the heat basically gets transferred to the surface of your skin, and then can go away, like in winds or in you'll sweat out hot molecules, and then when wind hits it or air hits it, those hot molecules go away, and so then you cool down. On the other hand, you also can do the opposite, where if you're really cold, the blood vessels in your skin will close, and your hotter blood will stay closer to your organs where it's needed more. That's how hypothermia can set in. You keep blood away from your extremities for too long, and those extremities start to die. So that is definitely an important function of blood, that temperature regulation. One thing we'll definitely talk about a little bit here, then more in our immunity lecture, is antibody production and immune surveillance. So there are so many different types of blood cells, and a lot of what they do, we'll talk about how the erythrocytes, or the red blood cells, basically just carry gases. These guys are all different types of, well, at least these are all different flavors of white blood cell, basically, and they mostly just protect your body. They're always checking to make sure nothing is getting in, and if it is, it's being marked for destruction somehow. Okay, so let's break it down a little bit. So when you go and give blood and they want to go in and start looking at what's in your blood, the first thing they do is they centrifuge it. So what that means is they go in and they spin it at really high levels, and that's going to cause all the heavy stuff to fall to the bottom and then the lighter stuff to move to the top. And what you see is plasma at first. So about 55% of your blood on average is plasma. And so if you're donating plasma, they do this and they take the plasma out and then they put the rest of it back into you. So it's pretty painful. But what is plasma? Plasma is mostly water. It also contains different proteins that are being carried around the body, such as albumin, which is totally just to maintain osmolality. We'll talk a little bit about that too. So the electrolytes that you need to for basically everything. So this is ions like sodium and calcium and phosphate and different things like that that you need for a lot of different things in your body. Those are carried in the plasma. Nutrients that are coming in from the digestive system are coming from the plasma. Wastes that are being moved away from different places are in the plasma, and then so are the hormones. So this is all the fluid component that is like basically water, and then all the stuff being carried in that water. So the rest of the blood is about 45% of that is the cell, or different kinds of cells, and then the parts of the cells that are floating around too. And that's going to be, both those things are important. So this includes your red blood cells, your white blood cells, then your platelets. So platelets are officially called thrombocytes. Erythrocytes are the official name for red blood cells, and leukocytes are white blood cells. So erythro is red in Greek, and then leuko is the Greek for white. So that's where this comes from. We will go into these things in more detail. Platelets are involved in clotting. And so anytime you have plasma without clotting factors, that's called serum. So you may see, if you are at the doctor's or something, you may see both of these things referred to that way. It just means they put something in it to keep this whole thing from clotting up, so they can maintain the structural integrity of the plasma for longer if they're doing certain things with it, like testing for certain things. Okay, so let's go into the different cells. So if we look at the red blood cells, the erythrocytes, what is happening here? So red blood cells, the whole point of red blood cells is to transport oxygen. So these guys are the part of your blood that makes it red, obviously. There is a myth that your veins are actually blue until they hit oxygen. That's actually totally false. All of your blood is red. It's just that arterial blood, so blood coming from a blood that's highly oxygenated, is a more orangey red, while the blood that has lost oxygen and is instead carrying carbon dioxide, it's kind of a purpley, like a deep reddish purple. The fact that your veins appear blue is actually an optical illusion, where when you have a pinkish skin and then something kind of purpley red underneath it, it's the blue that gets subtracted out that you actually see. And you can tell this is true if you look at different people's veins who have different skin tones, and you'll see that as skin tone goes away from being very, very pink, the veins get less blue or green looking. And so the old, there's a saying, someone who's a true blue-blooded American is actually kind of racist, because what you're saying is someone who is blue-blooded, that means their skin is very, very pink because their veins are appearing very, very blue. So fun fact, not a lot of people know. Okay, let's keep going. So if the main function of the red blood cell is to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide, well, where does red blood cells come from? Where do red blood cells come from? Remember, this is called hematopoiesis. So hematopoiesis is the production, so let's spell that, hematopoiesis. There we go. That's happening in the bone marrow. This is correct. Calm down. It happens, you produce about 2 to 5 million of these cells per second through mitosis. Interestingly, these cells don't have a nucleus. So we are one of, there are species out there that have nucleated red blood cells, but when we go through mitosis and make these cells, we actually lose the nucleus, and so you get this kind of pitted look, because usually the nucleus would be here, making it rounded. But when the blood is produced in the bone marrow and then goes and hits the spleen, because the spleen's helping to process blood, the spleen removes that nucleus. And what that does is it creates a whole lot more room for hemoglobin, which we'll talk about in a second. And it also creates this greater surface area, because now that it's kind of dipped in, you get more surface area instead of if it were kind of a bulky cell. And that allows oxygen and carbon dioxide to transport across the membrane a lot easier. So some things that are required for red blood cells is they have to have iron, folic acid, and vitamin D in order to make blood cells. So that is involved in hematopoiesis. So in order to create good red blood cells, you have to make sure you have a lot of iron. Folic acid and vitamin B are also important. A lot of times if people they feel anemic, we'll talk about anemia is they'll crave steak or something like that. So it had, spinach actually doesn't have a lot of iron in it. We're just kind of led to believe it does. But they'll crave like dark green vegetables or something with steak in it or something that has a lot of iron because their body is saying, hey, our blood count is down. Let's bring that back up with some more iron. Oh, we're talking about that. So each red blood cell lives about 120 days, and then it gets recycled. The parts are broken down. It becomes phagocytosed, so that means that the cell is eaten by something else, by a white blood cell, and it breaks it down into its parts, and then it either gets rid of it, or the parts, or it uses those parts to then create new cells. So the blood kind of regulates itself in the liver and the spleen. So these cells only last 120 days, but we're making 2 to 5 million per second. We're definitely doing okay on the red blood cell count. So I mentioned this thing, hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is this it's not a super complex protein. It's a protein made of 4 amino acid chains that kind of get linked together, kind of like a 4-leaf clover. At the very center of each one is this iron-containing group, which is called heme. And then these 4 things are called the globins. So the globins are the proteins, and the heme, is the inorganic little chunk in the middle that requires iron. So in order for this to be functional, the hemes have to have iron. Let's see. So what they do is the way that hemoglobin is shaped, it allows for oxygen to bind to it. And then when it gets to a certain concentration, it makes the oxygen actually fall off of it. So if you're in the lungs and you've got a bunch of hemoglobin that doesn't have oxygen on it, there's a certain shape based on the pH of the solution that it's in that the heme becomes, which makes it really easy for it to grab up a whole bunch of oxygen. Okay, and then the blood leaves the lungs and it goes to wherever, it's traveling through the body, and it goes, and wherever the pH is just right, because there's not enough oxygen, the heme will suddenly change shape, and then oxygen gets released, and instead carbon dioxide gets sucked up by the hemoglobin. So it's a nice little self-regulatory system, so that whenever oxygen is needed, the heme is a certain shape, so that it will, if it's all based on like the conditions that the hemoglobin is in. So if the conditions are right to soak up a whole bunch of oxygen, heme is a certain shape so that it can soak it up. If the conditions are that you're in a tissue that needs oxygen, hemoglobin will change shape, release the oxygen, and take away carbon dioxide instead. So it's like a little transformer that requires iron and these 4 functional parts. So how do you regulate to make sure you're getting enough red blood cells? If you need, this is one of those cycles like the production of calcium that we looked at with calcitonin and thyroid hormones, or insulin and glucagon with blood sugar. So there's a hormone called erythropoietin. So scientists like to make the hormone kind of match what it's going to do. So if the erythrocytes are the red blood cells, erythropoietin is going to be the hormone that regulates the production of erythrocytes. Okay, so the kidney is filtering the blood all the time. We'll talk about that later. And if as it's filtering, it doesn't notice enough red blood cells coming through, it's going to produce erythropoietin. And that's going to go to the bone cells and say, hey, what are you doing? You're not doing your job. Make more blood cells. And so so the kidney detects, so this is one of those systems where the blood is, the system is detecting itself. It doesn't go through the brain at all, which is a different set of rules. And so the blood gets to the kidney. The kidney says, oh, there's not enough red blood cells. It releases erythropoietin into the bloodstream. Then when the blood gets back to the bone marrow, the bones are told you need to increase your cell production. So then once you have a whole lot of cells, when that very cell-rich blood gets back to the kidney, it stops producing erythropoietin. If you don't have erythropoietin, you don't have that overproduction of red blood cells, and the system turns off. It self-regulates it on and on and on. So if you have too many red blood cells, that's called polycythemia. And so that could be a case where your kidney is not responding to, it's just for some reason always producing too many red blood cells. There is something called, well, we'll get to that in a second. Anemia, on the other hand, is something people see a lot. So you can have anemia. So that's when you have too few red blood cells. And that could happen because you don't have enough iron in your blood system. So just the erythropoietin can't even work because there's not enough. You can be telling the system to make more and more red blood cells, but if there's no iron for the hemoglobin, it won't make it. You could have lost a whole lot of blood for some reason. That would be a case of you don't have enough blood at all, so you don't have enough red blood cells. There's a lot of different ways to do this. The Something interesting about erythropoietin is there's something called blood doping. And so if you think about if you've ever been up in the mountains or at high altitudes, you'll notice that it's really hard to breathe because there's not a lot of oxygen around. And so your blood has to adapt to there is oxygen, it's just there's less of it than you're used to. So suddenly you start making a whole lot more red blood cells. And so because your oxygen supply is low. And so your kidney is like, oh no, we need more. Release even more erythropoietin. And so if you release a whole lot more erythropoietin, you start making a whole lot more red blood cells. That means you have a whole lot more hemoglobin in the red blood cells to extract as much oxygen from the air as possible. Now, a lot of really famous long distance runners or athletes, sometimes they'll train at very high altitudes, so they end up getting a whole lot of hemoglobin in their blood system. So then when they go back down to sea level, which has a lot of oxygen compared to altitudes, they have kind of a leg up because their blood is like, it has way more oxygen, and you have to have a whole lot of oxygen for your muscles to be very productive. And so there's something called blood doping where people will, instead of taking steroids, which can be easily detected, they take erythropoietin, even though they don't need it, just to kind of bump up their own production of red blood cells. The problem is we don't know enough about erythropoietin to know what else it might do or the long-term effects of doping with erythropoietin, and it's definitely an illegal step up. So you may hear about blood doping, and when you do, it's when people are either they're injecting themselves with blood, which is incredibly dangerous, or they're injecting themselves with erythropoietin in order to try and bump up their own hemoglobin numbers. So they're going into polycythemia for whatever reason they shouldn't be. Okay, so what happens when hemoglobin is broken down? Because it's actually a very complex and there are definitely much more complicated proteins in the body, but this is one that is used incredibly often. So you don't want to just throw it away. So what do? You instead recycle it. So there's three different things. So you recycle the globin, those big proteins. You break it down into its component amino acids. It's like taking a very complex Lego structure and then breaking it down into its blocks and then using the blocks to make something else. You can just reuse the iron. So you just take it. It's being broken down from an old hemoglobin molecule when the red blood cell is being broken down in the liver. That iron just gets taken and incorporated into new hemoglobin. And you release the heme it goes into part of the bile, which is, so we'll talk about it when we get to digestion, but so that heme just gets dumped into the digestive system and gets released in feces. There's two different kinds. So there's something called biliverdin. So verde means green. That's released directly from the I guess it's in the liver, but then the liver, that's a green color, and the liver converts that into bilirubin, which is yellow, and then that gets dumped into the digestive system. We talked a little bit about bilirubin in another lecture. If someone is yellow, they're jaundiced, so their skin is turning yellow, then what that is you're producing way too much of this bilirubin, and it's actually soaked, instead of being sent into the digestive system and released, it's kind of backing up in the system and going back into the blood system and depositing in your skin. And so that actually it's a sign of jaundice, and it means your liver's not functioning properly. So watch out for that. Let's talk a little bit about anemia. So there's a lot of different types of anemia. The whole point of anemia is just what it is just it's basically a catch-all for any time you have too few, the oxygen carrying capacity of your blood is decreased. So this could happen because you don't have enough red blood cells. It could happen because your red blood cells are too small. It could happen because you have weirdly shaped red blood cells. It could be that your hemoglobin's not functioning. It could be that the hemoglobin's not working correctly. It could be that you don't have enough iron in your system, so you can't even make functional hemoglobin. There's so many different kinds. You could have nutritional anemia, which is where you're just not eating the right things. You're not taking enough iron in order to produce good red blood cells. Pernicious anemia is where you remember you have to have B vitamins in order to produce red blood cells. So if you're not absorbing B12, which happens sometimes, you have to absorb it in your guts, then you can't create red blood cells properly. In these cases, sometimes people have to get shots of B12. You can have hemorrhagic anemia. That just means you're bleeding so much that your blood count is low because you're just losing it. You can have sickle cell anemia, and this is an inherited disorder where the shape of the hemoglobin is different, and so you get these sickle-looking blood cells. So this is a normal blood cell coming out of a capillary. This is a sickle cell where you can definitely tell that there's something wrong with the shape of this. Now, this means you can't carry as much hemoglobin in every blood cell, which is bad. But there's something about having sickle cell anemia that makes you resistant to malaria. Nobody knows why. People are still trying to figure out why you are resistant to malaria if you have sickle cell anemia or if you're just a carrier for sickle cell anemia. So the best place to be is to be a carrier for sickle cell without expressing it. So you have one parent pass down this gene, one parent pass down this gene, and this is the one that gets expressed. But that means your kids have a chance of getting sickle cell anemia. So if you don't live in a part of the world that has malaria, we don't worry about this, but in parts of the world where they do, this becomes a big issue. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about it right now. But it's something, so sickle cell anemia is something that if you're interested, you should look into it more because it's a very interesting, strange example of where the full phenotype of the disease state is bad, but it's actually better to be a carrier than to be a full healthy state. It's weird, but I suggest you look it up if you're interested. So this very complicated looking thing is basically just to tell you that hematopoiesis, or the production of blood cells, starts from pluripotent hematopoietic stem cells. So what does that mean? So remember that pluripotent, it means it's a kind of stem cell that is basically, it has a pathway. So the difference is totipotent stem cells are a cell that can become anything. So these are usually fetal, and it happens very early in the fetal line, in a developing fetus. But we always have stem cells happening that could become something. Okay, so our red bone marrow is full of these pluripotent hematopoietic stem cells, and they basically could become any one of these final cell types. Okay, so it could be a T lymphophage, ooh, goodness, can't talk today. T lymphocyte, a B lymphocyte, a erythrocyte, so that red blood cell. Okay, it could become a platelet, a mast cell, a eosinophil, a neutrophil, or a monocyte. So the thing to really just keep in mind is while there's only one kind of red blood cell, this is the only thing that carries blood, there are a whole lot of different white blood cells, and the whole point of the white blood cell is immune functionality. So the only thing that determines what this precursor or stem cell is going to become is that cytokine. So a cytokine, or maybe another hormone or protein called interleukin, that has to be present in order for this to then go on this pathway or then go and become this. So your body can control what cytokines are present and in what amount to control what blood cell types are being created and when. Okay, so let's talk a bit more about those white blood cells. So white blood cells are called leukocytes. In our blood, so if you look at a picture like this, these are red blood cells. You can tell because they are small, they don't have a nucleus, while these bigger guys are white blood cells. And you can tell they're white blood cells because they are larger. They have, these pictures are stained, so you can see the nucleus. Yeah, don't worry too much about that. So the bigger, lighter ones are the white blood cells, the tiny ones are the red blood cells. So 65% are the neutrophils. Yes, you do need to know all of these words and what they do. Very important. The neutrophils are phagocytes, and what they do is they fight inflammation. And so these are actually very interesting cells. Let's go and look at a picture right now. The leukocyte. Let's see, white blood cell. Sorry, I don't have this. Chasing bacteria. Don't have this. Okay. Let's do this. So let's watch this neutrophil. So phagocytosis is when a cell engulfs something in order to destroy it. So let me pause this real quick. So let's look at this. What is happening? So these are red blood cells. This little guy is a bacteria, and then this is a white blood cell. So you'll notice what the white blood cell does is it chases that bacteria because it knows it's an invader. And the reason why it knows it's an invader is that it has a protein tag on it. So everything has a protein tag on it called an antibody. And that antibody tells you if it's yours or if it's foreign. And so that's going to be really important. So the white blood cell knows that this is a bad bacteria and it needs to eat it and get rid of it because it doesn't have a proper antibody on it. So it could have, let's see what happens with this one. So again, you have a bunch of bacteria. Well, that's not my cursor. Interesting. Here's a white blood cell. Let's see. Oh, this is the other case. There's actually a whole bunch of bacteria attacking a white blood cell. So for some reason, this white blood cell could not function against the bacteria, and it's actually being destroyed. So that's sadder than the other one. Let's go back to the other one. Let's talk a little bit more about it. Okay, so let's talk about this. So the reason why the white blood cell knows attack, attack, and does not attack this one is because these are all tagged to be self, and they're tagged by antibodies that say, hey, we're on the same side, so don't attack us. So our white blood cells don't attack our happy bacteria that live in our stomach or in our guts because they're also tagged to be part of self. So they identify those antibodies to say, oh, you're part of us, I don't want to attack you. But this little invader guy doesn't have the antibody saying it's self, or maybe it has an antibody that specifically says, this is dangerous, kill it. And so it's going after it with it. So there's its flagella, pushing it around, and it's going to engulf it by just kind of glom it onto it and surrounding it. It's like the original horror movie. Blah, there it goes. And then it starts to digest it. So that's what's happening there. So that's a neutrophil. Okay, so the thing about the so it could be a neutrophil or a monocyte. Both of those are phagocytosis. The inflammation is, oh, let's move this back. Here we go. So inflammation is an important part of the immune response. And so what that is where your body brings in a whole lot of very high energy molecules to basically try to cook the bacteria or the virus or the fungus or whatever that's trying to, that it has invaded the body. The problem is that sometimes it doesn't understand that you're also killing your own cells before before the inflammation stops. So we have to contain inflammation sometimes. So lymphocytes, we talk a lot about lymphocytes. These are your B and your T cells. These are acquired immunity. So basically, this is where you've been exposed to something like chickenpox, and your body's like, oh, no, 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 this is a bad thing. This does bad things to my body. I never want to experience this again. So the lymphocytes go around and they tag something as like, oh, that's bad. Let's make sure if we ever see that again, we attack it immediately. So what the lymphocytes are doing are creating antibodies to make sure that you have basically an inventory so that you don't get the same disease twice. Now you might say, but then what about the cold? Everyone gets colds all the time. True. And so what that is every cold is different. The colds evolve so quickly that you never get the same cold twice, but you could get many colds because the colds evolve so quickly. Each time, though, it's those leukocytes or lymphocytes, sorry, that are creating a new inventory of oh goodness, what am I trying to say? Oh goodness, antibodies. There we go. To make sure like every cell in the body is identified as either self or invader, so it can protect you. Monocytes are also phagocytes, so they're eating stuff that shouldn't be there. Eosinophils are always watching for parasites, and they create antihistamines. So if you have a histamine response, you're having an allergic response, your body is going to sometimes try to decrease that. So the problem, if you have histamine problems like allergies, like I do all the time, my sinuses are always stuffed up, it's because a lot of pollens look like weirdo bacteria that is trying to invade us, when really pollen is just it's a sex cell from a tree, or some kind of plant. But your body's like, no, kill it, oh my God. And so these basophils are creating histamine to try and attack those invaders, which are actually just pollen. Your body just doesn't recognize them as something non-harmful. It tries to kill it. So the eosinophils are the response when your body realizes, oh, we're over that. We don't need to have that allergic response anymore. Let's kill it. Let's calm down that response by releasing antihistamines. Sometimes you have to help this when you take a Benadryl or something. You are taking an antihistamine to try and calm down your basophil response. Okay, so leukocytes should be a really good thing, right? So because what they're doing is they're trying to determine what in your body is good, what is bad. So they should be a great thing. So the white blood cells. But a lot of times people go in and they look at their white blood cell counts, and if they're very high, it could mean you have a low-lying infection or maybe a high infection. It could be a sign of if you have a whole lot of white blood cells, it could actually be a problematic thing. It could mean you have leukemia, which is that's when you have a cancer of the part of the bodies that create white blood cells. So that's definitely problematic. If you don't have enough white blood cells, that's called leukopenia. That could be due to something like AIDS or certain drugs. So the white blood cells have to be in certain balance, and that's definitely something your body's always trying to keep in balance. But when you go to the doctor and you get a blood test, you want to make sure you're also checking. Well, they usually do check your white blood cells. And if they find they're not within a normal range, either for you or for people in general, they'll probably have you do follow-up tests as a result. Okay, so the blood it has more things in it than just cells. So what kind of proteins are hanging out in the blood besides just the random hormones or nutrients that are always floating around and trying to be moved around the body? So there's some things that are always in the blood. So we always have albumin. This is a protein made in the liver. It accounts for 60% of all the plasma proteins, and all albumin does is maintain osmolarity. So if you've ever seen one of the sad pictures of kids who are starving and they have a little gut, they have a little beer belly looking thing, what's happening is it's not that they like suddenly ate a big meal, it's that the albumin in their blood has started accumulating in their stomach just because they don't have enough blood to move it around, and then all of the water is accumulating there too because it follows the high osmolality. Okay, so we have albumin in our blood basically just to maintain a certain level of osmolarity, or like yeah, let's just know that. So it's an important thing, but it doesn't really do anything else. It's a nice non-reactive protein. So antibodies are what I mentioned a second ago. These are recognition proteins. They bind to non-self parts of macromolecules. So these are proteins that are floating around all the time, and they attach themselves to invaders to say, hey, this is not ours. Or it could be they attach themselves to organ transplants. And so if you have an organ transplanted, if your body rejects it, so you may have heard of bodies rejecting an organ transplant, what that means is the body had an antibiotic response. It put a whole bunch of antibodies on it that said, hey, we don't know what this is, get rid of it, it could kill us, and then the white blood cells attack it and try to get rid of it. Okay, so this happens. So antibodies are basically recognition proteins. They get stuck on anything in the body to either say, hey, this is good, we like this, or to say, hey, this is really bad, you need to get rid of this. And so then your white blood cells come along and get rid of it. Another very important protein is fibrogen, and what fibrogen does is it creates clotting. So these are these long, skinny proteins that cross-link with others. So they're just floating around like this, and then if all of a sudden this catalyst of thrombin is created, because let's say you have a cut, and that cut is going to then release thrombin to say, oh my God, there's a cut, we're losing blood. These proteins will then lay down all of a sudden to try and create this cross-linking. When they do that, platelets get stuck in them, and then when the platelets get stuck in them, they recruit more blood cells to try and create a bigger and bigger clot until the blood can flow freely again through the vessel and not out of your body. So that is fibrogen. So fibrogen is that blood clotting cross-linking protein. Okay, so what the heck is a platelet? So a platelet is just a chunk of cell, and it's just floating around, and you might think, well, it's a chunk of cell, that's bad, but actually it's good because when those cross-linking proteins build up, these pieces of cell, these platelets or thrombocytes, get stuck to that cross-linking, and they help plug up whatever hole is there in a wound to create a clot. So it's actually a very good thing. So what's hemostasis? So hemostasis so heme means blood, and then stasis means same. So it's actually really important to make sure our blood volume is all, sorry, let's just check it real quick. So make sure our blood volume is constant, because just for very many reasons. So if for some reason your blood pressure starts to drop, or let's say you're stressed and all of a sudden you need to increase your blood pressure really quickly, you could do vasoconstriction. And So what vasoconstriction is when you contract you constrict all the blood vessels. So that's going to cause blood to move faster, and it's also going to increase blood pressure. You could have a platelet plug formed, and so that might, if you're losing blood because you have a cut, you're going to be losing blood out. That plug is then going to make sure you're not losing more blood. We're going to talk about coagulation. So coagulation is when stuff starts to build up in chunks. Okay, so that's different from clot formation, but it's very important. And then, so anticoagulants are kind of the I don't know why I wrote this. So, you can also repair any place where you have a tear using these fibroblasts. So these are kind of cell that have a lot of fibers in them, and they basically create scars. And so, a scar is a very quickly laid down set of tissue that it just kind of makes the system work so that it doesn't not work. So that's really important. So heparin is an anticoagulant. So when you're taking certain drugs, you might have heparin in it to make sure that your blood is not clotting unnaturally. Okay, so this is a very complicated thing. What you really need to know is that coagulation or clotting is very complicated. So this is the platelet formation that you see with fibrin. It's definitely the precursor to a nice clot, but coagulation is like a very good, more definite kind of clot. So the fibrogen comes in first, okay, and then to make sure you're making even better cross-linked proteins, you have all these different things. Don't worry about this. Basically, just know it's a complicated process where fibrogen has to be, so thrombin tells fibrogen, oh my God, there's a hole, you got to start fixing it, and then fibrogen becomes fibrin. Okay, and that basically lays down that net, which allows things to be cross-linked into that net so that you can create a clot. So if someone has hemophilia, that means they can't clot. So what that means is somewhere in this line, something doesn't work. And so they never lay down so fibrogen is never, it never gets started getting cross-linked, and then you never lay down that net which catches the platelets to then create a clot. So then you can bleed out just from a very simple cut. So it's actually a very dangerous disease. This is also something that is usually carried down. It's on the X chromosome, which means you're more likely actually to get it if you're a guy, because if you are female, you have two X chromosomes usually. We can talk about differences, but a male only has one X chromosome, and so you're more likely to have one non-functional hemoglobin protein gene than you are two, and so it's usually in the males that we see hemophilia. And again, that can be anywhere in the creation of clotting factors you have a problem, because it's a very complicated process. Okay, so the last thing we really want to talk about is blood types. So this is something very complicated that I'll probably do a second video on. So basically, there are a whole lot of proteins sitting on all of our cells to tell you, this is my cell, I made this cell, don't mess it up. Okay, so in the case of autoimmune disorders, your body doesn't recognize its own antibodies. So these little guys that are basically the proteins that are hanging out on your own cells don't get recognized by your body, and you start attacking your own system. Okay, so how does your body make sure that you don't attack your own blood cells? Well, it depends on what type of blood you have. So this is all about the compatibility of antigens, which is the protein tag that sits on blood cells, and the antibodies, which are these Y-looking guys, which are floating through the system all the time. And whenever they hit something that doesn't match, they basically become a big old flag so the white blood cells know to come in and kill something, okay? So normally we don't make antibodies to ourselves unless you have an autoimmune disorder, like I said. So if you have type O blood, you don't make any antibodies, okay? So what that means is your blood is basically just completely clear of any tags. Nope, just kidding. You do make antibodies. Okay, so, let's see. How do I want to talk about this? I'm going to go into the details of this with the second video, so know that's coming because I want to be able to draw it out. But know that the blood type system is all about what proteins do you have versus what antibodies are you floating around in your system. And the reason why it's really dangerous to get the wrong blood type is you have, after you get a transfusion of the wrong blood type, you get something called agglutination. And so what agglutination means is you put in the wrong blood type, your body freaks out because it starts killing its own blood cells. And agglutination is when you start breaking down your red blood cells. Because you have this breakdown of red blood cells, you have a whole bunch of hemoglobin just being released into the bloodstream. That starts to just create this giant traffic jam, and it starts to clog up any small blood vessels because they're just trying to bind to anything they can. They're not doing what they're supposed to. No oxygen is being delivered where it's supposed to be. You get this big clog. When you start clogging up a whole lot of different things, you start to get organ failure. And as you go through organ failure, you die. And so getting the wrong blood type is incredibly dangerous because you basically are causing everything in your blood system to break down and clog up your system, and then you die. But again, I'll talk about the specifics of that in a second, or specifics of the antigens involved in blood types in another lecture. Let's talk really quickly about Rh factor. So Rh factor is another protein that hangs out on the blood cell if you have this. So if you just naturally produce Rh, all of your cells in your body have that Rh factor to say, this is mine, I make Rh. So let's say you have a woman who is Rh negative. She does not make the Rh protein, and she has a baby with a guy who is Rh positive. So all of his cells have the Rh protein. So what that means is even his sperm cell has Rh protein, which means when they have a baby, the baby is going to be Rh positive because that's the dominant gene. So when you are, you're basically totally safe in this situation until the woman gives birth. So when someone gives birth, the blood that's inside of the placenta suddenly mixes with the blood of the mom. Until then, it's all going through nice filter systems. There's no interaction, and it's totally fine. Once a positive baby is born to a woman who is negative, the body has this moment where it's like, oh my God, what is that? And it starts to create all of these antibodies so that if they ever experience something with a positive Rh factor again, they will kill it. Okay, they'll go through agglutination and they'll try to kill something. So now, basically, the woman, there's this weird twist in evolution where if a Rh negative woman gives birth to an Rh positive baby, she ends up ready, her immune system is ready to attack her next baby if it is Rh positive. So here, this is a woman who's now sensitized to Rh positive babies. She has a baby that's Rh positive. This isn't going to be a danger until, again, she gives birth. But as soon as she gives birth, her body tries really hard to mount an immune response. And if you have a very intense immune response during something very sensitive like birth, you could bleed out and die during childbirth. So this is probably a reason so many people used to die in childbirth, because they had Rh positive babies and they were Rh negative. So what do we do now? Because it's not like we don't have that problem anymore. There's actually a drug you take where it's called Rogam, which basically tells your body to it hides all those Rh negatives. So basically it's binding to the Rh positive proteins in the baby to basically hide them from your own body so that you don't attack your own baby, because that's sort of horrible. Okay, so here's basically the summary. So an Rh negative mother develops antibodies to Rh positive baby during the 2 days after birth. Okay, so she's basically then ready to, her body is like, if I ever see an Rh positive thing again, I have to attack it. So same thing with chickenpox. If I ever see chickenpox again, I'm going to attack it. So after you're exposed the first time. It's also, by the way that vaccines work. So you get a vaccine that's a dead version of a virus, and then your body's like, oh, if I ever see that virus, I'll destroy it. So you either never see the virus again, or if you do see the virus, your body kills it before it can hurt you. So basically your body is seeing an Rh positive baby as a virus that it wants to destroy. So if that mom then has a second Rh positive baby, late in pregnancy, you start to develop these anti-Rh antibodies, which means they start leaking over. Like there's a point in latent pregnancy where you get more leaky, the placenta gets a little more leaky, and so the mom starts to attack the baby in utero. This leads to hemolysis, this leads to jaundice, this leads to agglutination. It can be really dangerous. So if you're Rh positive, it's a really easy blood test. You're given Rogam to make sure, if you're Rh negative and Rh positive baby, you're given Rogam to make sure you don't attack your own baby in utero. Okay, there we go. Okay, so we're going to get into blood type stuff next time, but I think that's enough of blood for today. Have a good day.